Cobalt Reserve Archival Log. Date: Saturn Star 13th, year 837 post-divergence. Senior Archivist Nimrah speaking. This log is being recorded in the city of Amon on the west coast of Taldore and will be sent back to the Cobalt Reserve in Westrun by post. In my many years of service to the Cobalt Soul, I have made it no secret that my chief academic interest lies within the study of the Hells and its residents. Devils have fascinated me for far longer than I can remember, and that fascination is what brought me to the Cobalt Soul and its vast repositories of knowledge in the first place. However, it has also drawn the ire of my superiors. My rank has allowed me certain leniency, but those in charge feel I dabbled too much in dangerous subjects. It is for this reason that I must move beyond what the reserve can offer me. While this is not a formal letter of resignation, it is what some might call a tentative one. I'd much like for my position to be waiting for me upon my return from my sabbatical, but would not at all be surprised if it were filled with another. That formality dealt with, we move on the subject of this log. Let it not be said that Senior Archivist Nimrah has any motive beyond the betterment of collective learning, as I will, in the greater academic interest, be utilizing this log to document all that I've learned in my preparations for this coming journey. Some others in the reserve may balk at the diary-like nature of this log, but I would hardly be the first to utilize one in such a way.
You keep a diary?
Not myself, though I know of at least 3 other archivists who spend more time making logs about their personal lives than about their work, however.
You should spill their names.
I have little interest in. What is it that people call it? Pot? Calling the black kettle?
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that expression before for sure. Not where I'm from, but still.
Is it regional? Do you remember where you've heard it?
Oh, in my travels, a couple different places.
How utterly fascinating.
Sorry for interrupting. Please continue.
Of course. At my side as I record this log is Celiana Sharp, a Shadar Kai woman from out in East Wildmount.
Rexentrum born and raised.
She came to Westwind recently seeking myself out from memory. We'd had a brief encounter many years ago when I'd attended an academic conference sponsored by the Reserve. She had fallen ill, and I had bestowed upon her a periapt of health to ensure that she would not experience a premature end. She and her family were most gracious. Admittedly, her reappearance came as a surprise. I pride myself upon having an excellent memory. But this was a short encounter during a long conference, so it was not exactly at the forefront of my mind. She shows remarkable ability in her memory, at least. She required my services with the most urgent matter. A personal family tragedy, to maintain her privacy, had come upon her, and she could think of no better person or place to petition for aid. Much to both of our good fortunes, the aid that she required was perfectly suited to my exact study and expertise. Devilry. I had her sign a contract.
This one loves their contracts.
I do. Contracts are invaluable for sorting out everyone's priorities.
That's one way to put it.
Yes. Well, nevertheless, she signed it. It stipulated that Celiana Sharp, one of substantially greater physical and martial prowess than I, would serve as my bodyguard and accompany me on my travels in pursuit of my studies. In exchange, I would provide any and all support that was within my power to assist her in recovering what she had lost. With these terms agreed upon, we joined together and began our preparations. It was at this point, some 7 days now, that the other individuals whom I'd been looking into came into view. I will recount their story as I have gathered it from the beginning.
Oh, exciting. I've wondered what their deal was this whole time.
Date: Busendar 1st, year 833 post-divergence. The location: Nicodranas, Menagerie Coast in southern Wildmount.
Oh, Nicodranus. I've always wanted to go there. Have you ever been? One of my brothers went once. Told me about this singer who's just got the most beautiful. Sorry.
Our first subject is Mal Venkram, known then as Lady Mariella Venkram, the young dame and heir of Mordain Venkram and the Venkram family's holdings. The family was one of the lower rung of Nicodronian nobility, and Mariella's parents treated her with all the respect and care one might expect of people in such a societal caste.
Your prose is good. You're getting better at sounding normal.
What is it that you mean?
Never mind.
Mariella wished for freedom from expectation, from responsibility, and most of all, their father. So, that day, they abandoned that name and took to the hills around the city, known as Mal Venkram henceforth. They had left a ransom note under the falsified moniker of the mercenary, Mola, threatening Lady Mariella's life. Mal knew her father's pride would sooner see him hire his own mercenaries than pay a ransom, and that he did. Two people traveling from the Dwendalian Empire and looking for work, a human man named Jep Dunya,
What a stupid name.
and an elven man named Loth Renham, both of the magically talented persuasion. The dyad set off for the hills and wound up ambushed by this Mauler, who revealed themselves to be Mal Vankram. They then offered the two mercenaries a choice: fight and die, or help them with their own goals and be paid double. They made the more fiscally sensible decision. Mal's goal, the primary reason that they had fled from home, was to conduct a rescue.
Yeah, Mal was all set up with an arranged marriage for political reasons, set up by their dad. But they were too busy being in love with some rich boy.
How did you come by that information?
I peeked through your notes.
Mal had been prepared for an arranged marriage established by their father, but their romantic feelings lie with another, a young human man named Felix Eder, also of Nicodronian nobility. His life was altogether less comfortable. He is an alchemical genius, and the source of the vast majority of his family's wealth. Most of his days were spent in the basement of his family's estate preparing new potions to sell. After the two mercenaries agreed to take Mal's side, the next several hours were spent preparing for and conducting this rescue operation. Using the arcane abilities of Jep and Loth, the trio were quick and successful in their endeavor. They had fled with Felix to the city docks, where a ship had been secretly chartered from Mal by Sigrun, the Vankram family swordmaster who trained Mal to fight.
This next bit is where the other one shows up, right?
Correct. Aboard the ship eastbound for Shorehas, this group ran into a man who would end up joining their troop and becoming close friends with Mal, a half-giant named Rick Otter. Rick hailed from Port Damley, the largest city on the coast and the seat of power for the Clovis conquered. He was a businessman and family man, running a small cheese shop in the beaded alley, alongside with his 3 children he was raising, all adults or nearly adults at the time. He had gotten into trouble with the Myriad, owing them a great deal of coin. They had threatened his life and that of his children, so he devised a plan to flee the city with a promise to the Myriad that he'd return with the means to bolster his business to such a degree that he could settle their debt. This plan was not what one might call approved by the Myriad. Another instance in which a contract would be advantageous, mind you, and they'd sent an assassin for Rick. In his confrontation with his hired blade, he accidentally woke Mal and their traveling companions, beginning their long, storied history together. The assassin was thrown overboard, and the group of the 5 traveled to the dragonborn city of Zarsith Kitril on the southern coast of Shorehas. Their travels went on for a great deal from there, after becoming embroiled in political infighting that spilled over into riots in the streets. The party left north from Zarzith Kitril to Asarius, the city of beasts. Here they became acquainted with the looming threat of war and all the sorts of espionage and violence that serve as its prelude when they foiled the Dwendalian Empire-backed terrorist plot. Then, it was on to their intended final destination, the Kreen dynasty capital of Rasona. When they had arrived, brief discussions were had about the payment owed by Mal to Jep and Loth, and Rick began making his preparations for a planned trade agreement with the locals near his old hometown of Bezozin. They attempted to lodge and prepare for an extended stay, but had been hooked into a case of missing children at a local orphanage. One thing led to another, and the 5 were dragged into the bob fields to the north of Rasona, deep into a night hag's lair.
Oh, yeah. And then they had to fight a bunch of nasty stuff. They killed some gross hag minions. They met a talking fairy dragon named Cinnamon Roll and his husband, a 3-foot sunflower named Amador, who wielded a rapier and talked in poems.
Yes, and they.
And then Amador and Cinnamon Roll teamed up with them to fight the hag, and the whole cave they were in got all shaky and came out of the ground and floated up into the sky.
The hag had apparently conducted some kind of ritual whereby.
And then a bunch of weird monsters from different planes started showing up. There was a hook horror, some shadow creatures, a bunch of imps from the hells.
Imps? I don't remember them mentioning those.
And then they all nearly died. First Loth fell, then Jep. Then Mal and Rick had to watch as Amador was killed and fell back to solid ground far below, and Cinnamon Roll desperately chased after him. Then Mal went down, and Rick was swarmed by imps and the hag and fell himself.
Yes, it is all quite exciting when you hear them tell it. Or when Celiana tells it, for that matter.
Sorry, fighting scary monsters is cool.
Nevertheless, despite failure, they survived to tell another tale. They had not stopped the hag's ritual, but had severely wounded the hag in battle. When they next came to consciousness, they were being pulled aboard a large crystalline vessel.
Ooh, I like this part.
These vessels were ships providing passage to and from the Radiant Citadel, a lost city deep in the ethereal plane that had some sort of magical connection to different worlds across time and space. Something the hag had done had managed to open one such connection to Exandria, and pulled the party through. Once resuscitated by an illithid physician aboard the Citadel, they had met with its leaders and began exploring the city, the different worlds connected to it, all while trying to find a way back to Exandria. After some time, they had learned that this newly opened connection that had brought them there had birthed a new crystalline vessel, known to the Citadel as the Conquer Jewels, which linked to their home. It appeared and docked at the city, but the party had no chance to use it before a throng of refugees came pouring out from it. They learned that this ship had hailed from Risona, which had been affected by a variety of natural disasters due to the hag's ritual, though this detail was known only to them. They attempted to return to Exandria with Jewel, but found the connection to be tenuous and unstable. Each use would bring the passenger back to Exandria a significant amount of time later than they had left.
Yeah, Mal, Rick, and the others had only been on the Citadel a month, but came back 3 months later.
And with each subsequent use, the time elapsed would only increase. By the time they had disembarked for the Jewel of Final Time, an entire year had passed on Exandria. During those back and forth trips, they had wound up in negotiation with the leaders of the Kreen dynasty. The Kreen wanted to keep the Citadel's existence secret, possibly to use it against the Dwendalian Empire in the outbreak of war. These details would become relevant when the party had all returned and settled into Risona. This party would be no longer. Loth Renham had stayed behind in the Citadel, saying not a word to any of his companions. Rick Orta, troubled by the Kreen's political machinations, saw fit to flee west, where he would send word to the Dwendalian king of the Citadel's existence.
Which is like literally treason. He used to be a part of the Kreen military. He still wears his officer's jacket.
Indeed.
Oh, and don't forget to mention he still managed to make that deal for his cheese shop and all.
Yes, Rick's journey took him along his original intended destination in Shohas, then homeward to settle debts with the Myriad, then further onto the Dwendalian territories, where he would settle into a life as a blacksmith under a different name in the town of Blade Garden.
For now.
Yes, it would be temporary. For the human, Jep, he left behind his friends with a letter. You see, his magic stemmed from a connection to a greater being,
Which he carried around in a bucket everywhere. Literally a weird, gross bucket of goo.
This creature had ostensibly merged with Jep during the hag's ritual, and as time went on, its corruption had become more severe on Jep's physical form. Seeming to anticipate his own demise, he left his companions to ensure their safety and attempt to find a cure on his own. This left just Mal and Felix, as well as Rick's mother, whom they had met in Risona, and exclusively referred to as Mama, living in the Kreen city and retiring
Temporarily.
from adventuring life. Felix opened a potion shop which he ran with Mama, and Mal did mercenary work on the side.
Ooh, can I take up this next part?
Yes.
Okay. So, a year passed by the time anyone from this group would reunite. Jep and Loth are gone, never to return. Rick has spent that year traveling and then living in Blade Garden, Mal and Rasona with Felix and Mama. One day, someone important in the Kreen dynasty reached out to Mal and asked them to carry a package for them. They wanted someone not known to be associated with them, so the package would be most secure. Mal agreed and was sent north to Jigao. Rick got a letter too, from an old friend who he reunited with when they all stopped in Sarius, a goblin beastmaster for the Kreen who Rick calls Daps. It turns out there is an annual festival in Jigao called the Festival of Merit, and Daps was going to reunite their old friends there and wanted Rick to go. As you can see, fate was working its magic. Or something. The festival was the additional cover for Mal's exchange, and wouldn't you believe it, the two ran back into each other. They caught up. Mal yelled at him for running off, about what you'd expect. They participated in various festival games, and did pretty well at them too. But there are more important players here in Jigao at this time, which, funnily enough, was the first of Brusendar 835 PD, exactly 2 years after they first met. But anyways, at the same time, 3 others came to Jigao. A half-drow blood hunter named Kian Geln, who would be a short-lived traveling companion to the group, joining them there in Jigao and leaving about a month or so later. Also present were a wandering duo, a young white dragonborn wizard.
She was most definitely not a wizard.
No? The others said she was a wizard.
I am a wizard. That sort of magic the others described almost certainly makes her a sorcerer imbued with wild magic.
Yeah, hi. Hello. Sorry to interject. Fennel would always call herself a wizard, but it's because she didn't really understand what that meant.
Huxley, you were supposed to wait until I set you up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be quiet now.
Right. Anyways, a young white dragonborn sorcerer named Fennel Clearbrook and the great Huxley Rose.
The Great. I don't think that's a very fitting
Huxley
title.
is a pretty good spellcaster, at least.
I suppose so, but it's not really me. All that power comes from Aggie. She's the reason
And so,
for...
Huxley and Fennel also participated in festival games, as did the Bloodhunter Kian. By the end of it all, by the nature of the festival's rules, those who do best and earn the most medals across the games compete in the final challenge. On one side, this wound up being Rick and Mal, Keehan, and Huxley and Fennel. They competed against another group. Their names were Iojabe, Dermot Warder, Galsariad Ardith, Irvon Wastewalker, and Maggie Keeneyes, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, a water genasi with orcish heritage, a goblin, a drow, a human, and an ogre. I noticed we were mentioning their heritage as well when new people came up, so yeah.
Yeah, so the two groups competed in this final challenge where they went underwater into an old grotto.
Oh, I hated that! Fire genasi do not do well in water, and I had to be underwater for, like, an hour. It was awful.
They raced to the end of the grotto, fighting a giant octopus and a swarm of fish with sharp teeth and a giant shark at the end.
Yeah, gods. I remember when I killed it. The big thing swam straight into a pillar, and then it crashed into a wall near the back of the cave, and that tore open, and... Oh, sorry.
And then the heroes followed the glowing light from the cave wall opening, and inside found an ancient amulet once belonging to a demigod who'd fought in the Calamity. The demigod named Elixion begged them to find him and free him, setting their course for the next year or so. They were initially reluctant.
Well, Fennel was pretty excited, to be honest.
But after meeting with a Jigao village elder, they were compelled to go forth. In all this, Mal managed to pass off the package, which, as it turns out, was for an old friend of Rick's, who was now a Kreen spy, and they all set off. The five traveled south, then east, arriving in Bazazan just as things were going down. They helped fight some monsters, ran into their festival rivals again, and were drawn by their research about the amulet and its history to the Betrayer's Rise, a giant dungeon used by the Betrayer gods during the Calamity for all sorts of fucked up stuff.
Hated that place.
It does sound most intriguing, though.
They all wound up descending into the Rise, dealing with weird puzzles and dangerous monsters and deadly traps.
There was this one that nearly killed us. We had all split up, Rick with Mal, and me with Fennel and Keehan. Fennel had this ability to turn into a dragon, about the size and power of a young one. We got to this point where we needed to go down into this room with no stairs or ladder or anything, and Fennel suggested flying us down. We all got on her back while she was in dragon form and went down. We came into a room in front of a big statue around the same time as Mal and Rick, and were caught up by the statue's magic. It caused some of us to attack one another. Not too bad, except, when one of us is a full-grown dragon. Fennel nearly killed us. Knocked Mal clean out. When Fennel snapped out of it, she flew off deeper into the dungeon, very upset with herself. We caught up, fought off some of the demonic orcs, moved on, but I don't think Fennel really ever moved on from that. Sorry, didn't mean to bring it down. Please continue.
Right. So then you all went deeper and found the altar, right?
That's right.
They found this altar, which was once the site of one of Elixian's prayers, where he beseeched the gods for power. The grotto where the amulet was one of those sites too. Here, after running into their festival rivals, who had taken a job from a seedy elf lady working for a group called the Consortium of the Vermilion Dream, and getting into a brief fight with them, which ended in peace when they laid down their arms and abandoned the elf lady to be killed by the party, they experienced a vision of Elixian, who could speak to them directly. They asked him lots of questions, learned about his past, about his current state, about stuff that had happened to him. He had been killed, kind of, by the Ruiner, one of the Betrayer gods. The Ruiner struck him down with his spear, down in Marquette, in the city of Kael'Maro. That city sank beneath the earth, the jungles around it were turned to desert, and now the city of Ank'Harel sits on top of it all. All they learned from him set them on their next path. With the help of a tiefling woman named Question, who worked for the Cobalt Soul, they were taken to Marquette, to Ank'Harel. There, the Cobalt Soul asked for their help in dealing with all the stuff popping up around Elixian, the Vermilion Dream, and this strange red stuff called Ruidium. They agreed, but not before taking a detour.
I remember that day. Rick got word from his family, something about the Myriad. He was going to leave back home to Wildmount, and we all insisted on going with him. Fennel stayed behind in Ank'Harel. Pretty sure she just needed some time after what had happened in the Rise.
Luckily, Mal had held on to something. A note, which amounted to a check which could be cashed from her family's treasury, worth 10,000 gold. They hoped to use this to charter a skyship back to Port Damali.
Oh, gods, yeah. Then when we tried, they told us we couldn't cash it without someone from the Vankram family to approve it. But it couldn't be Mal because they were the one cashing it. And right when we thought we were done for, who else but Mal's own dad stepped right off the skyship. It was super awkward, and he looked rough. Oh my gods.
What?
Is something the matter?
I just remembered he was missing a horn when he found us. I promised him a new one. That was more than a year ago.
Oof, ouch.
I remember he got drunk and almost dove off the airship after talking to Rick. He was messed up.
Sounds like melancholy.
Astute observation, Celiana.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's fine. I can mail it.
Most likely, yes.
I hope.
Anyways, so, then Mal's dad offered them a skyship back, since the 10,000 gold wouldn't pay for 3 tickets, and they had a super awkward flight back. But at least Mal had a chance to have a heart-to-heart with Pops and make up for some stuff. They had promised to return home to see their mother soon. After a couple weeks in the sky, the ship arrived in Port Damali and they got to Rick's place. They met his 3 kids, learned that the eldest was an absolute natural at cheese making, which led Rick to formally leave the cheese business and give it all over to her, and that his son had gotten into some political trouble in an effort to get the myriad off their backs. They had dinner, slept, and were interrupted during breakfast by Cinnamon Roll, the little fairy dragon they had met in the Hag's Lair. He had been in the city skulking about, trying to live an adventurous life as his husband would have wanted. He came to warn Rick that the myriad knew he was back and would be coming for him soon. So, they cut the visit short. Rick said goodbye to his kids, and they all left for Nicodranus, narrowly avoiding a group of myriad thugs. In Nicodranus, Mal visited home and spoke to Mum. Then they all went north into the Dwendalian Empire. They went to Zadash, got directions from a Firbolg who ran a magic shop, and found a Cobalt Soul archive. They convinced the local archivist to let them use a teleportation circle to the Cobalt Soul Temple in Ank'Harel and save themselves a long trip back.
This is when things really started to pick up.
They then started working with the Cobalt Soul. They took on several missions, learned more about Elixion, Kelmaro, the Vermilion Dream People, and Ruidium. They were invited to formally join. Mal and Huxley accepted, but Rick refused.
I cannot say I was surprised when they told us. I do not believe Rick would enjoy the life with the Cobalt Soul very much.
He still stuck with them on further missions, though. They eventually descended into Kelmaro and found a place called the Netherdeep, a pocket dimension made out of Elixion's negative emotions, his anxiety, sorrow, anguish, and anger. They went in to finally face him and end things. Inside, they found the Vermilion Dream had gotten there first, and Fennel was with them.
Oh, poor Fennel. She wasn't much younger than me, but she felt almost like a daughter the way I had to take care of her when we traveled together. We had been together for almost a year before Jigao. The Vermilion people had used her guilt about what she did to Mal and the rest of us to lure her in.
They had to fight her, as she had taken on a sort of Ruidium corruption. Rick nearly killed her in one blow, didn't he?
Yeah, I love Rick, but he isn't great tempering himself. He carries his own darkness.
Fennel wound up escaping further into the Netherdeep, and as the others kept moving through it, fighting monsters and manifestations of Elixion's tormented memories, they eventually found her again. They got the Ruidium-tainted items she carried off her and convinced her to join them for the final battles ahead. They faced horrific, twisted horrors of the deep.
Yeah, this was all underwater again, by the way.
They fought a corrupted angel, and even the moon Rudis itself. Kind of. Finally, they found the way to the heart of despair, to Elixion. He spoke to them, and they deemed him not yet ready to be redeemed. They had to fight him, first as a giant eldritch abomination, then as a powerful, radiant, angelic being, and finally as a frail old man.
We all wanted to save him. I tried and failed to talk him down, but Mal and Terrace Sutton, this halfling cleric of the soul who went down with us, they both did a pretty good job with that. Rick seemed committed to killing him, though.
But you didn't kill him. You all did save him. Elixion was redeemed, which, as a result, also kept him from escaping and wreaking havoc on the world above. You saved a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess we did. Yeah.
No simple feat.
Elixion was grateful, as was the Cobalt Soul. His redemption destroyed all the Ruidium outside the Netherdeep, and the Netherdeep itself. Elixion is out there now, wandering, living his life. When everyone was saying goodbye, he ended up leaving the city with Fennel, and the two headed to Drusar on the first stop of a long tour of Exandria, so Elixion could see all he'd missed.
Rick left too, saying some quite sad things to us at the time. I won't repeat them here. Suffice to say, he felt he needed to go. I decided to stay in Ank'Harel and do my research there, and so did Mal. They spent some time traveling back to Rosona to get Felix, and now they have a home in the desert too. Felix even set up a new shop.
And your research is what led to me finding you. Well, that and the stories Alexian spun had disseminated far and wide in a relatively brief time frame.
Yeah, you three are famous now.
Unfortunately.
Yes, over the following 8 months or so, Huxley began drawing the ire of Cobalt Soul leadership, spending a lot of time researching the Hells.
My wife, Agatha, she was kidnapped, taken to the Hells. She's the source of my magical power, and I only draw that power to use it to save her.
Which is why we are all here, together now.
That's right. After recruiting Mal and Huxley by sending them a letter, we left Western Vermont. We found Rick in Kymel on the way, and it's like one big happy family.
That sounds nice. Yeah.
Which brings us up to speed. Now, I must go about closing out this log.
Hey, hello, nerds. Nerds is out of your books. We gotta go.
Yeah, come on, we know where Crave is.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, we should go.
Yeah, okay, let me grab my glaive.
End log.